Hello and welcome to the Bestseller Experiment, where we continue to discover what makes a best-selling novel and inspire you to start, finish, and publish your book. I'm Mark DeVoe.
And I am Mark Stay. And a big thank you, as always, to our patrons and academics and everyone who listens to this podcast and keeps us going. And we have some new patrons to pipe on board. So be standing, ladies and gentlemen, for Ali Dent, for Annika Jacklund, and Denise Ganley. We salute you all, and all of these people who keep the good ship Bestseller Experiment floating on the ocean waves of literature and podcast. I've run out of metaphors. It's hot here yesterday.
I heard it's hot. I'd like to also welcome as well all of our lovely new academates who have joined. Thank you so much to all of you that put your applications in for the end of September. And if you missed out, fear not. There are a few spaces for October available now, but you have to get over and apply academy.bestsellerexperiment.com. So, Mr. Stay, tell me about this heat. I just was chatting with my mum, actually, weirdly enough, before this podcast, and she said, "Oh my gosh, we're melting," or "I'm glad the heat's dying down." Is it starting to kind of shift a bit?
No, it's hot.
No,
actually,
really?
Yeah, it's hot. You know,
what kind of temperatures have you got?
Well, you get people in Australia and certain parts of America just going to laugh at us now, but it's like, oh man, it's like 28 degrees.
28?
Oh, I know.
Oh, blimey, Mr. Stay, you should have been over when it was 40.
Someone listening in Death Valley going, what?
Yeah, someone like reaching for that last oasis, and they're like, 28? Come on.
28,
That's cold. Well, we've actually, in Canada, the kids went back to school today. It's a very exciting. I dropped my daughter off at university, and my other two have gone back to school today. And it's a proper English September morning over here in the west coast of Canada. It was like a bit drizzly, chilly. You remember those chilly mornings in September?
Yeah. Layers, wearing
What's
layers.
going on?
Yeah. Good
Or maybe you're going to get tropical winter. Who knows?
It's almost as if the climate is changing.
Well, who knows? Who knows? But tell me about your week, because you mentioned something about a record screenplay that you've done. I'm curious.
Well, I've been working on rewrites of someone else's screenplay, and I basically did a page one rewrite. So all the world building and the ideas were done, but it needed a bit of a refresh. So a director came to me and said, "Do you want to give this a go?" And I managed a first draft in 2.5 weeks, which is a world record for me.
2.5 weeks. That's
Yeah.
bonkers.
And
wow.
I've got to say, it's in pretty good shape as well. So, but that's because a lot of the heavy lifting had been done by the previous screenwriter, who will, of course, retain a credit.
Yeah,
so
that sounds like quite a nice gig to get, actually, because it's a bit like doing a cover version, right? There's a lot of structure already in place, but there's probably
it's like being I forgot what they call it, when an actor stands in for another actor. The actor gets a lurgy and another actor steps in. So it can be a little bit like that, But it's been really, really good fun. And then for the next couple of days, John and I, the director, we do what we call a collabo read, and we've done this in all our films, where we sit down, we make the script as big as it can be on the screen, and we read it line by line. In particular, the dialogue, just to make sure that every line sort of snaps and crackles and earns its place in the screenplay. And that's good fun because we shut the door and put on silly accents. Yeah, it is good fun.
Yeah. That sounds like you can just have a lot of play with that, and it's probably easier to do that with a book with someone like with a screenplay with someone like John than it would be, say, to do it with a 300-400 page book. I guess that's a lot.
Yes,
heftier.
although slight segue to our special guest. Well, we're going to talk about audio and multiple voices and that sort of thing later on. So stay tuned if you're interested in that.
Absolutely.
It's almost like we plan this, isn't it?
Yeah, well, actually, talking of our special guest this week, we're going to dive straight in because I think there's so much to cover at the other side. We better get rocking and rolling. So tell us about our amazing guest this week, Sarah Denzil.
Sarah Denzel is a 1 million copy best-selling author of psychological suspense novels. Her books include the #1 bestseller, Silent Child. And she was talking to me about Stolen Girl, which is the hotly anticipated sequel to Silent Child. And now, here's the thing. Silent Child was Audible's Thriller of the Year. 2017, and was a massive success with audiobook fans. And so we've got another audiobook here, but it's got an all-star cast. So it's not just one narrator. We've got Joann Froggatt, who people will know from Downton Abbey, Rosalie Craig from Company and the Queen's Gambit, and Geraint Howell, who's in 1917. So Sarah and I, we discuss audiobooks. We discuss writing sequels. We discuss what people really mean when they say they want your characters to be more likable. And her cat almost makes a cameo. One day we're going to get an author's pet on the show. This is one of my ambitions.
Totally.
Anyway, yes,
I love it.
Chat.
Absolutely brilliant. Well, and if you are fascinated with audio, you must listen to this interview. Absolutely brilliant story. So let's have a listen in on Mark chatting with the wonderful Sarah Denzil.
Sarah Denzil, welcome to the Bestseller Experiment. How are you today?
Thank you. I'm good, thank you. Yeah, pretty hot.
It is a scorcher. It is a scorcher. There's one thing we Brits do is we complain when it rains too much and we complain when it's too hot. And we're definitely in the too hot zone at the moment.
Yeah, I've got my window open, so hopefully it won't be too noisy.
I've got mine open too. I've already been invaded by a giant moth this morning, so Lord only knows what else is going to fly through the window. But we're not here to talk about that. We are here to talk about Stolen Girl, the hotly anticipated sequel to your book Silent Child. And Sarah, you've had massive success with paperbacks, ebooks, hardcovers. But Stolen Girl, I think like Silent Child before it, is an audio first, is exclusive to Audible. Why go down the audio first route?
Yeah, well, actually, Silent Child was an ebook first before audio, but Audible really loved the book and they just wanted to champion it, which was so great. So when I started to think about a sequel, Audible just happened to get in touch at some sort of time, and we were talking about it and how great it would be for the audiobook to exist on its own for a shorter period of time before the ebook and the paperback came out. I think it's quite an emotional story from Silent Child and into the sequel as well, that it just works well as an audiobook, especially when you've got such a great actress narrating it, like Joann Froggatt, who just gives her all to every single scene. It just works really well.
Are you an audiobook fan yourself? Do you listen to a lot of audiobooks?
To be honest, I kind of struggle with audiobooks a little bit. I think I'm the kind of person who struggles to listen to people talk for a long period of time because I'm quite introverted, so I like the quiet, and I don't process information through listening as well as I do through reading. But I've found that non-fiction books are much easier for me on audio. And also, I really love listening to diary sort of style books. Like the first fiction book, well, it's one of my favourite books of all time anyway, but the first audiobook that I really loved was Dracula because it has those diary extracts. And it's like the narrator is just reading the diary to you, and it's really cool. So I've been listening to all the Adrian Mole books over the last couple of months, which I read as a teenager, and I didn't really finish the series, and it's just been so much fun to listen to them.
I'm exactly the same, actually. I can struggle with fiction and audio because I tend to have voices in my head, if that doesn't sound too weird.
Yeah.
Whereas I think with nonfiction, the only way I can get it to sink in is through audio, because that just seems to be how I take nonfiction in. But it's a fascinating process. And as you say, when you have someone of the caliber of Joann Froggatt reading your works, it does elevate it to another level. Do you find I think she's read quite a few of your audiobooks, hasn't she? Do you find that having someone else's voice read your stuff, does that influence your writing at all? Do you start hearing Joann's voice when you're writing these characters?
That's a really interesting question. I hadn't really thought about that. I think I did when I was writing the sequel. I did start to picture her acting it as if it was a TV series. And then it became like Emma couldn't be anyone else, which is very strange. But before then, no, I don't think I did. But funnily enough, when Audible were casting Silent Child, they said they wanted to try and find someone who'd worked on TV. And I didn't really want to presume too much about who they were thinking of casting. So I didn't want to start saying actors' names who they would never be able to get. But I actually thought of Joann first. She was the person I thought of first, but I didn't tell them, and they cast her. So we were on the same page there. Yeah.
That's amazing. That is amazing. Did you get involved in the process at all? Were you able to go to the Audible studios and see it being recorded, or do you prefer to let them get on with it?
No, I didn't actually make it. They originally had a time date that they were going to record the books, and it was very close to my wedding. So I decided that it would be a bit too stressful to travel down to London and then come back. And then they ended up rescheduling that date. And then it happened a few months after, and it kind of, I think things moved so fast that they'd already recorded it by the time I found out. So I didn't get a chance to go and meet her, unfortunately. And then the recording for this one was in lockdown, so I couldn't go.
Yeah. Well, if you ever get a chance, do it, because it is absolutely fascinating. It's a brilliant process, and it does make you, like you said, because my audiobook is read by Candida Gubbins, and once I started hearing her voice, certainly writing the next book in the series, you do start hearing not just her voice, but the intonation, the phraseology, and everything. It does sort of get into your head. Stolen Girl is a sequel to a story where it felt like it had all kind of been wrapped up. So, were there challenges in writing a second book in this series?
Definitely, yeah. I think I always find it a challenge to write a sequel, even books that I've decided is going to be a series. I've never been the kind of person who plots out an entire series. I know some writers can do it for like 10 books. They plot out the entire series and they know exactly what they're doing. And I've just never been able to do that. So I sort of read through the first book, and I'd already had an idea of one very small thread that was loose in Silent Child that I could then work on in the second book. But then the characters came back so quickly that I was really surprised to get back into their heads. I thought that was going to be the hardest bit, and it was actually the easiest.
Wonderful stuff. Let's talk about your career, because as I understand it, it all started with you sort of noodling notes on Post-it notes at work. Is that right?
Yeah, well, I've worked in admin for quite a while. I've sort of floundered a bit after university. I studied psychology at university, which I think plays into the book writing quite a lot. And the only thing I knew was that I didn't want to do any more studying in psychology. I was completely done with studying, and I didn't really know what to do. So I just went into temping. I was working in offices, and there's nothing creative about working in an office. And that's fine if, you don't have a creative side to you, or if you can find other ways to get satisfaction from other kinds of creativity. So I used to find that I was just kind of doodling on Post-it notes just to do anything that was creative at the same time. And then I always used to love writing stories, even as a child. And during my university years, I did a few short stories. I started at home just writing a few short stories, sending them off to publishers. Can you hear my cat meowing, by the way?
We love pets. We love pets. Any pets at all, that's fine. Bring the cat on the show. That's fine. We have no problem with that. We tried to get a swearing parrot on here once, but the owner wouldn't allow us. So the cat is fine.
The problem is he goes mental when I talk to a screen, and he just comes up and starts attacking me, so I can't let him in. But as long as it's not too distracting, that's fine.
That is fine. Sorry, you were talking about writing short stories and finding a creative outlet.
Yeah. So I first started writing science fiction and fantasy short stories, and I sent a few off to some publications, and to my surprise, they actually got accepted to these publications. And I was like, that shocked me. I think I don't think I really thought anything more about it. I was just writing these stories. And that was when I decided to try and write an actual entire book, which had always felt like such a huge achievement that I would never be able to do. And somehow did it.
That is fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. We're always obsessed with people's writing habits. Obviously now you write full time, but when you're working around a day job like that, apart from when you're noodling on Post-it notes, how were you able to break up the day and find the time to write around work?
Well, my last or second to last admin job, my last admin job was as a timetabler at university, which is quite seasonal. You're very, very busy for a couple of weeks in the year, and then you have these long stretches of not really having much to do. And one of those long stretches coincided with National Novel Writing Month, NaNoWriMo. So I wrote an entire book at work at my desk. And no one knew. No one had any idea. It was a terrible book, and it stayed on my hard drive, which I don't tend to do. I usually try and make sure I salvage something. But this one's really bad, so it's never going to see the light of day. But yeah, I don't think I did very well at separating work and writing. I think I did quite a lot of writing at work, which is not really advisable.
We've all done it. I know I've. But crucially, you finished something, and certainly finishing a full-length novel for a lot of people, that's an amazing achievement. So that gave you the confidence boost to go on and do something else?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I remember this book I published was like 9 years ago now. It's a young adult fantasy dystopian book under my other pen name. Well, it's my real name, but I separated my young adult stuff with my thriller books via pen names, because obviously you don't really want teenagers to read the dark themes that are in the psychological horror thriller books. But the first draft of that book was not great at all, and it had to be completely rewritten. It took around 2 years, I think, to rewrite, and it's still a very flawed book, but it was at least very entertaining. And I self-published it, and people enjoyed it, so that really gave me such a confidence boost to keep going.
Fantastic. That's The Blemished, which you're writing as Sarah Dalton.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
And you said it took you a couple of years. So you're doing draft after draft. Were you getting people to give you help or advice? You did an online course, I believe.
Yeah, I started this online course and I never finished it. I don't know how good it was, to be honest. I found the cheapest one I could find, and I did get some feedback that was really useful. I think I was the one who decided that first draft was really terrible. So I rewrote it. And then when it was a bit closer, I got some editorial help from a small publisher, and they gave me some really harsh feedback, which was kind of difficult to take at the time, but helped so much in the long run. And then again, another draft. And then I found some beta readers online. So they gave me some feedback. And that was when it was very close to the finished product now. So it was kind of tweaking from then on. So it was a long process, but I learned a lot. And I think it's something writers tend to need to go through on their own to really improve their writing skills.
What do you think was the biggest lesson that you learned from that harsh feedback?
Make sure that your main character is likable, especially in something like a young adult dystopian book. I leaned too far into the sort of strong young woman and ended up making her quite violent and a bit nasty. So I had to sort of bring it back so that she was more flawed rather than just plain unlikable. And it can be difficult to write likable characters, particularly in psychological thrillers.
It's one of those words that because I certainly get this in the world of screenplays, which is people say, "I'll make them more likable," and actually, what they mean is make them more interesting. Usually, I think they don't have to be nice. They don't have to be all peaches and cream. They just need to be less than one note. I think, and that's that's So I mean, so many of our favorite characters are villains, but they have facets to them that they're not all just a black hat bad guy. So
definitely,
yeah.
That's something I like about psychological thrillers, because you can make all the characters grey, the heroes, the villains, everyone. They can all have these sort of grey facets to their character, rather than here's the hero, here's the villain. This is the person you root for, this is the person you hate. It's more true to life, I think, when you add those grey areas in.
Absolutely. And of course, studying psychology will give you a bit of insight into this. We had Mick Finley on the show recently, who's also studied and teaches psychology. Would you recommend writers get at least a sort of a grounding in psychology before they start writing?
Possibly. I think if you want to write about specific things like antisocial personality disorder, for instance, we write about a lot of sociopaths, which comes under that bracket.
Yeah.
And there's there are a few misconceptions, I think, about who sociopaths are. And even I've obviously studied at an undergraduate level, and even I've kind of had to change the way I think about something like sociopath, because the research changes all the time, and what I learned at university isn't quite as relevant now as it was then, and things have changed. So yeah, I think it's really useful to at least do a lot of research if you can, and maybe look out some online psychology courses. I think it's something I could even do now, to be honest, because obviously I would need a refresher if I was going to write about something very specific. So definitely, I do think that something like an undergraduate degree really does just give you like a big blanket kind of knowledge of things. It's not going to be much about people's individual behaviours and mannerisms. It's going to be very much more of an overview of the entire psychology course. So yes and no. I think that was a slightly rambling answer, but yes and no is the answer to that question.
Excellent stuff. I saw somewhere that you mentioned earlier that you don't plan ahead, and I also saw somewhere that you write in notebooks first. Is that something that you still do?
I write an outline in my notebook first, usually, yes. For some reason, just writing down bullet points really helps me. I kind of I imagine the whole book like it would be a movie, and I just bullet point every single plot point that I think would be important. Just, maybe only 500 words or something like that. It's a very rough outline, and then I can either move on to breaking it down into chapters, or if I feel like I just want to start writing, and then I can start writing and come back to that outline and rework it a bit, make it a bit more structured. So yeah, there's something about just writing things down by hand. Just seems to move faster for me. I've tried Scrivener, and I've tried a few different programs where you have those little note cards and the character backgrounds, and it's just too organized for me. I think I'm just more of a chaotic kind of messy outliner I just like to scribble things down, basically, and try and work it out in my mind as I'm going along.
No, that's good. Does there come a point, have you recognized a point now where you've got enough scribbling, you go, okay, I've got a novel here, I've got a story, now I can start writing a first draft? Do you recognize what point that is, and what are those kind of markers?
Definitely. I think as long as I know the beginning, the middle, the end, and the twist, because obviously psychological thriller, it's got to have some sort of twist, then I can start. And sometimes if I'm writing a book that has more of a whodunit kind of mystery style to it, then I'll actually work through the outline and come to the end and then write like 5 or 6 different endings. Just bullet points, like different ways you can explain what's been happening. And then as I write the first draft, I'll just try not to think about the ending. And right at the end, I'll just decide which feels the most organic and put that in. And hopefully, if I'm surprising myself, then I'm surprising some readers. That's the theory anyway.
No, that's great. I love that. I absolutely love that. The other thing, of course, being an indie author, hugely successful indie author, you only answer all to yourself as well. So you're not feeling the pressure of do you set yourself deadlines, or do you just sort of publish got a book, let's get it out there?
A bit of both, I think, for me. It really depends on how I'm feeling about my work at the time. Last year, I somehow just managed to get my head down and just write lots and lots of words. I think I drafted and finished 2 books, and they both have come out this year. But the beginning of this year has been extremely unfocused for me. I started 1 book. I tried to give myself a deadline. I couldn't finish it. So I've started another book, and now I'm sort of trying to decide whether to give myself a deadline or to just see how it goes. So I would prefer to be the kind of person who works towards a deadline, and I want to be, but I do struggle. Sometimes I find them very, very motivating. I've worked with a publisher a couple of years ago, and I was the kind of person at school who would have their homework done the night they were given it. I do not like being late for anything. So when I had those deadlines, everything was finished, like 2 or 3 weeks before the deadline was due, because I'm just that kind of anxious person. I have to make sure I meet my deadlines. But when it's actually me giving myself a deadline, it's very, very different. I know that I can just say, no, I'm not doing that to myself.
Very good. This is normally the part of the interview where we say, what's coming next? So can you tell us, or is that still a bit up in the air?
Yeah. Well, Stolen Girl is coming out in September. I haven't actually given myself a publication date for Stolen Girl yet. So maybe just keep an eye on my social media. And then right now I'm working on a book that I think will come out early next year. It's very, very early days, so I can't really say much about that. But I will obviously put as much information as I can on social media when I do have more of an idea, and hopefully I'll get this deadline sorted.
Fantastic. Where can folks find you online, Sarah?
Oh, I'm pretty much everywhere. Facebook, Instagram. I recently started TikTok. Right. So you can find me on TikTok, and Twitter as well. I tend to be on Instagram the most because I find it quite an addictive platform. So if anyone wants to reach out, that's probably the best place to find me.
Wonderful stuff. We'll put links to those in the show notes. Sarah, thank you so much for speaking to us today. We really enjoyed it, and best of luck with Silent Child and Stolen Girl, both amazing duo. They're available now on audio, and you say possibly paperback and ebooks in September. So keep an eye out for that.
Thanks very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Pleasure. Speak to you again soon.
You.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
What are your writing dreams? Finishing that book, quitting the day job, becoming a best-selling author? Well, over 4 years, we've studied the advice of over 300 best-selling authors who've collectively sold over 500 million books. And we are excited to announce the Bestseller Academy. If you're ready to take your writing to the next level with accountability, craft, and coaching, your bestseller dreams are now only a click away. To find out more and apply, visit bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. That's bestsellerexperiment.com audiobooks.com/academy. Do you know what really struck me about Sarah, which was incredible, and her success that she's had? You know, it's just kind of like, just on her website, it just has a little kind of thing at the bottom saying million selling author. And then the fact that she's self-published, and this has all happened like on her own watch, on her own ship. I think that's an absolutely incredible achievement.
And she's so cool. She's just so, there's no showing off with Sarah. There's no boasting. She's just, I just write the books, and and she really works hard on the writing, really works hard. But there's, she is the most self-effacing, regular, normal person, and it's lovely. It's so lovely and
wonderfully unassuming, isn't great. She? And
yes, but that's the word. Thank you.
Question. Well, the question that I was curious with is that often. I mean, we've interviewed lots of authors, lots of self-published authors who are multi-million selling authors, million-selling authors who've sold 500,000, 300,000. I mean, crazy, wonderful numbers. But often you see this trait in them, which is they're these kind of like absolutely like focused, like crazy on the marketing, very, very, when it comes to things like deadlines, for example, it's like they're on it, they're writing a book, in a month or two. And yet Sarah's so laid back. I was thinking, wow, this is incredible. I mean, there's hope for everyone else, right? There's hope for all of us that maybe don't like have that drive or fascination with marketing. And I think I speak for the majority of self-published authors out there. I don't know that many. I mean, most people who love marketing go and get a marketing job. They get into marketing because that's their passion. Most authors kind of see marketing as a necessary evil in some cases, or a means to an end, or a thing they wish they didn't have to do. But there's hope, because it seems like Sarah's success has really come like a lot from the huge amount of support she's had from Audible. Would I be right?
Yeah, I think so. I think that was certainly the breakthrough for her. But, like I say, she is unassuming. I think her focus is on the writing. And I think that should be the primary focus for any author, because you can do all the marketing you want. But if the book isn't up to scratch, if the book isn't as good as you can possibly make it, then your odds of breaking through and selling those kind of quantities are much diminished. So, it was from looking at Sarah's blogs and everything else, there's a big focus on getting the writing right and making it work, and I think let's talk about writing by hand in notebooks, because this is my big breakthrough this year. It's what I've been doing, and it's so, there is, I guarantee, a direct hotline from the brain to the hand to the pen. And weirdly, just this week I bought a new book, and it's a story of Tom Mankiewicz, who's one of my favorite screenwriters. He's Hollywood royalty. His dad was Joseph L. Mankiewicz, who did Guys and Dolls and Cleopatra and stuff like that. And Tom wrote some of my favorite movies, the first two Superman movies, a whole bunch of Bond movies and stuff like that. And he became a script doctor. And I opened it at a random page, which I've lost and I couldn't find before the show. But he was saying, he writes all his screenplays freehand in a notebook, writes them all in a notebook first, and then types them up on an old, he's passed away now, but he typed them all up on an old typewriter. The whole thing, notebooks, brain, hotline, pen, it's really working for me. Nothing goes on the screen now until it's seen some ink first, So I think,
in fact, if I'm going to delve back into our audio library, Mark, that we have on the Academy, which has basically got many of the clips of the specific things we talked about, and I'm going to search for notebooks and handwriting, because I know that we talked about it really early on, didn't we, in the first year. And it's funny because I know a lot of authors that also do it, and like you, I've always been, here it is, my notebook, my bullet journal. In fact, I've always been a big writer, an ink or pencil writer, and I finding more and more, I've got pages and pages through my current journal, which is integrated with my life. I'm going to do some stuff in the Academy about how to kind of create a writer's journal using bullet journaling specifically, because a lot of people are being like, it's changing my life. I'm getting all these kind of fun messages from people, but I've got like just drawings, diagrams, spider diagrams, plot points scattered throughout this whole book, but completely indexed so I can find everything. And that's one of the big tips about using anything. Like if you don't want to use your own book, indexing it, it's like genius. It's like, why didn't anyone think of that with journaling? But to be honest, there is, I think, what's happening, Mark, this is my kind of take on it. I think that we've all become so screenified, if I can use that word so boldly, and that we actually... I can't, okay. Actually, we've become so, I'm going to say anyway, screenified, because we spend so much of our life now with screens. I mean, I'm looking at a screen right now. And when I finish this podcast, I'll be picking up my phone and checking on my screen. And then, when we go and watch our favorite shows, we're watching a screen. And there's just so much screen. Even my Apple Watch, for goodness sakes, a screen now. I mean, everything's a screen. So I think there's this rebellion or a desperate need to counter that. But also, it's also rediscovering the beauty of the written word. There's something... handwritten word, there's something magical about that, and I think we're going to see it's a bit like going back to vinyl in a way, isn't it? I guess we're going to see a bit of a swing back to handwritten plots and things.
I mean, what worries me is if you do go back and dig out a clip of us talking, I bet it's me poo-pooing the idea and saying, no, get it straight on the screen.
I don't think you did, but you were definitely a screen. You were definitely that, it was hands on keyboards, wasn't it? So.
Well, I was, back then I was writing on my commute. So a laptop it's easier to write on a commute a notebook. You got.
Can you imagine? It'd be a little worse than
yeah,
like spider scrawl, wouldn't it? By the end of it, it'd be like your whole book would be encrypted, though. No one else would be able to understand what you'd written. Yeah. So it's a security.
Not even me. But no, the thing is, where you're doing spider diagrams and stuff like that, I am. Here's one of them. I'll hold it far away from the screen.
Yeah, for
but
sure.
It's just pages
just
and pages.
Tons of
pages.
Notes, yeah.
And it's me essentially writing a very rough draft of the book, and I will sit down at the desk and I will know what the problem will be for the day, and it will be, well, how do we get her out of this situation? And I will literally write the words, and I'm using the word literally correctly there, because I will literally go, how do we get her out of this situation? Well, maybe we could do this. And I have a conversation with myself. If anyone stumbles across these after I pop my clogs, they're going to think I'm completely off my chump. But it is that thing of it just getting the cogs whirring, and then before I know it, I'm actually writing prose, and I give myself, I scrub stuff out, or I, go back, and I just keep going. I just keep going, make mistakes, and then what goes on the screen is me taking that, translating it, and turning it into something that looks vaguely like a novel. So yeah.
As an aside, I think because there's so much around using notebooks and using this new form of journaling, bullet journaling, which I've been doing and love for a few years, I think we should probably whack a joint course together on the Academy, Mark, because I think a lot of people are going to be really fascinated in how to do it. There's a lot of stuff about, this is a great concept, but actually being able to see some pages of our journals and do a course around it, I think it'd be quite fun to do.
Yeah, I know. We'll do it on social media at the end, but I know people. It's come up in the craft in your life coaching sessions.
It has. Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about something that fascinated me as well. Never heard of this before. The idea of a cast within an audiobook. I was always under the assumption that you hire your voice actor and they narrate the book basically. And sometimes they do, like in our book, Back to Reality, absolutely brilliant. Had different voices for all the characters, but this is something you said you've seen before with having actors come in.
Yeah, well, funny enough, one of the first examples I ever saw of it was with Paul Torday's Salmon Fishing in the Yemen, and we had Piers Torday on a few weeks ago. And for Paul's book, there were very clear point of view chapters. So this chapter would be this character's point of view, the next chapter would be another character's point of view, and they were men and women. So the idea, they got 3, maybe 4 actors in to do those separate point of view voices. Now, not every publisher is going to do this for every book. Paul's book was a big purchase for Orion, big advance and everything, and they're making a big hoo-ha about it. So the idea was, okay, let's get some budget, get some actors in. And that's clearly what's happened with Sarah's book. You don't get, cast members of Downton Abbey cheap. No. They're going to be above the base rate that you might normally get for an equity contract.
So, yeah, that's kind of a Hollywood budget almost for an audiobook, isn't it, in some ways?
Well, let's go through some other examples. You want to talk about Hollywood budgets. One of the biggest ones recently, Audible is doing a Sandman adaptation. So that's Neil Gaiman's comic book as an audiobook. Right?
Wow.
So that for a start is whoa. And it's basically like a radio drama adaptation. So this is the kind of thing that maybe you're thinking of, that radio drama. Here's some of the cast. So you've got Neil Gaiman narrating as the book, essentially. But you've also got Riz Ahmed, Kat Dennings, Taron Egerton, James McAvoy, Samantha Morton, Andy Serkis, Michael Sheen.
What?
I mean, yeah.
Who's who? Andy Serkis. Can you imagine getting him as on your audiobook?
I mean,
unbelievable.
Just incredible, absolutely brilliant. So that's really top tier. Neil Gaiman gets a Hollywood cast kind of thing. But then you look at something like, Daisy Jones and the Six, and we spoke to the author of that on the previous podcast. That's a book where it reads like extracts from biography, or it's fiction, but it reads, so you have a character talking essentially directly to the reader, in a memoir kind of style. So that's one that had, six or maybe seven different voices. More recently, there was a Stephen King short story anthology, Skeleton Crew. So again,
I love Skeleton Crew. That was one of the first Stephen King books I ever read.
Well, listen to this. This is quite a recent audiobook adaptation. So short story. So they've got a different reader in for every short story. So you've got Matthew Broderick, Michael C. Hall, Paul Giamatti, Will Patton, David Morse, and many, many more. Big names. It is something that's becoming increasingly common. I mean, there's still, the single narrator thing. Some people really like that. They prefer it. And if you've got a great actor who can do, those intonations and accents, I mean, like I was saying with Candida Gubbins, who reads my books, just incredible. With just a slight change in her tone, it's a completely different character speaking. So great narrators are just fantastic at that. So it is something that, as the competition for your attention span increases, getting a cast in like that Sandman thing, Audible are going to make a very, very big deal of that. So yeah.
It almost feels like we're moving into a new era, Mark, here, aren't we? It feels like, when you get audiobooks on that kind of scale, I almost feel they need to be called something bigger than just not just an audiobook, but something that is kind of, I don't know what it might be called, but it feels like it's somewhere between what we think of as a traditional audiobook and something that kind of Netflix might do visually. It's kind of somewhere in the middle there. It'd be very interesting to see if this becomes a new thing and whether these books will become like premium audiobooks. But Skeleton Crew, wasn't that the book? I know it was a book of short stories, wasn't it? Wasn't that the book that had the very original story of The Green Mile in it? Or am I getting mixed up with Stephen King books?
No, The Green Mile was first serialized. I was a bookseller when this happened, and it was Malcolm Edwards at Orion, funny enough, who convinced Stephen King to do this, as I understand the story. He said, why don't you do a Dickens-style serialization? So each one was released, I think, I'm trying to remember what the interval was. I don't think it was one a week, but it was like one a month or something like that, and it was in 6 parts, The Green Mile. And when Stephen King started it, he didn't know the ending, I don't think. So it was, there was a lot of, but that maybe was first serialized.
Maybe I'm thinking of Lawnmower Man. There was a short story that there's people screaming down the podcast at us right now. But I remember reading a short story, and then I think it was Lawnmower Man with Arnie Schwartz. I think, if I'm even right with that, honestly, my memory. But I do remember reading a short story. I think it was in Skeleton Crew. Maybe someone can email us and tell us. Or no, put it on Facebook or Twitter. What was that story that was in one of Stephen King's short story books that then went on to become a major Hollywood movie? I think it was Lawnmower Man. But anyway, we digress. There's a little trivia for the week.
The Mist.
The Mist?
Yeah, The Mist was in Lawnmower Man. And that was a movie. Not one for the family at Christmas.
No. As many of Mr. King's books aren't. Absolutely brilliant. One of the other things that I found fascinating about Sarah is it was really good for her to verbalize and say this out loud, because we always love it when people are so honest as authors. It's like, it's so important to get feedback and know that the feedback might be quite hard. It might cut you. You might have to sit there for a few weeks simmering or, patching up your wounds. But it really feels like a lot of her success has happened because she was willing to take the feedback, sit with it, and then take it on board. And she was always reaching out for people to give her feedback. And I think that's really one of those kind of, if we talk about secret sources of bestseller writers, I think people who are willing to actually listen to others, either take on board or at least, hear what they have to say, can only help us grow as writers.
Absolutely. I think that, again, calls back to Sarah's unassuming nature. She's not going to just bang out one draft and hope that's good enough. She's somebody who strikes me who does the due diligence with her writing. And I think the quote that I love from her was, she says, if I'm surprising myself, I surprise the reader. And,
I love that.
She's thinking of the reader all the way through. And this is something we can sometimes lose sight of. So she did say she was the kind of student also who when was given homework, did it that night. I was not that student.
No, most people aren't actually. Most people love a deadline because it means they remember when they have to do it, i.e. the night before.
The night before.
Yeah, with a can of Red Bull or coffee. And I mean, some really beautiful kind of humanity moments in that interview where she talked about, she wrote a book at work, and she mentioned it. Like, I think there's a Twitter, Facebook, or email conversation. Did you write a book at work? Let us know, obviously, if you can. But I think it's really interesting that, that's how her career started. A lot of people, not that I recommend it, because it can obviously be very dangerous for your career, or maybe very positive for your career if your career is becoming a writer.
I mean, I wrote the first draft of a play on the night shift at Waterstones in Wimbledon. Now, Waterstones Wimbledon is a 2-story shop, and I used to do the late shift quite a bit. And it was one of those stores that unless you went to the back of the shop, you didn't realise there were stairs. So you could go the whole evening and 2 people would come upstairs. It was the loneliest shift ever.
What did you do? So, what does a night shift at Waterstones entail? Are you restocking
we were
shelves?
We were open till 9 o'clock.
Oh, okay.
Just because we're central London. There's a train station right there. You could sell books till very, very late. So yeah, I'd be on the late shift sitting there waiting for customers who never came. But actually that was a notebook situation. I'd whip the notebook out there because you can't exactly get your laptop.
No.
In fact, I don't think I had a laptop then. That's how long ago that was.
Yeah, but you know what? That's so brilliant to be writing a book in a bookshop. It's a bit like going to the library to write a book. What an inspiring place to write.
But it depends who you work for. You see, there are some companies that, and I think this is if you're working for a big mega corporation, don't do this because they might lay claim on it. Do you remember? Do you remember Brat Stoles? Right, you remember
Bratz, yeah.
Brat Stoles?
Yeah, I remember the Brat Stoles.
That had those big pouty lips, and
yeah,
they came out and they knocked Barbie for 6. There's a very good show on Netflix called The Toys That Made Us, and there's a whole episode about Barbie, which is absolutely fascinating. And Bratz were like the number one toy for doll fans. It was just
I remember my Barbie daughter went through the phase. Yeah,
but what they discovered was that the person who designed the Bratz used to work for Mattel and designed them in their spare time while working at Mattel. Mattel found that out and said, we'll have that. Thank you very much.
Intellectual property, yeah.
Buried Bratz. Barbie was everywhere. So I mean, I don't think. I mean, I used to write with obviously my lunch break at Orion. But,
that's
in my own spare time.
Right? That's your spare time. Yeah. No, it's a really interesting one because it also, for me, what it brings up is COVID and working at home, and how does a writer kind of manage that? Because I know one of the biggest challenges for employers is they're worried that their staff are like not actually putting in the hours, but then there is a degree of flexibility. I mean, we both work from home now. I mean, I've worked from home for nearly, goodness me, 25 years mark this year. 25 years I've worked from home, but working for myself. So, if I decide to write in the middle of the day, that's on me. But also having run technology companies and startups and things, this idea of intellectual property, it's a very common thing. You get a contract that says if you're working full time, anything you create, is our ownership. But it's a very grey line when you're working at home. It's like, well, do you have to clock out and say, right, it's 5 o'clock, I'm now press the button, I've logged out of my work account, and anything I do from now on is my time. We're going to see some really interesting things developing around this because of the fact that COVID has really forced this idea of home working upon so many people. But yeah, writing books. I mean, what if you, I guess because a book is so different from what most people probably do for their day job. But yeah, if you work for a publisher, right, what would happen there?
But publishers generally don't create the content.
That's true, actually.
They essentially lease the content for a number of years.
Yeah.
You know,
the worst that could probably happen is they'd say, right, you have to sign that book to us because it's so good. We want claim on publishing that book, which is a good problem to have in some ways, right?
Yeah, exactly. You know,
it's brilliant. Love
it.
No,
they don't do that.
No. Have you written a book at work, though? If you have, tell us about it if you can. We'd love to hear those stories around that. It's a really good little conversation topic. The other thing that I thought was really interesting was around, she talked about the confidence boost that she got around feedback. It's something that we don't often hear about. Like often you think it's the opposite, right? It's usually knocking you down because feedback is always trying to improve something. So it's always usually telling you what you can do, what's wrong and what you can do to change it and make it better. That's 95% of all feedback. But getting those nuggets where people actually say, you know what, this is really good. Like when she wrote her first story and it got published, that kind of feedback can be huge for an author's confidence.
Absolutely. I mean, I edit stuff for clients and I'm very aware that you can't just pick out the problems. You've got to highlight the good stuff. And there is always good stuff. Anyone who's, even if it's their first attempt at writing prose, you'll see they've got the hang of this. They've got this, there's a bit, you'll start to see their strengths and say, okay, you're good with dialogue, lean into that. You've got to learn how to, maybe work on this, that, and the other better, but yeah, this is your strength. Great. So yeah, anything like that is a huge boost. I love it as well. Whenever I get feedback, I'm very needy.
Well, we all are. I mean, do you know what? It's so important because you're pouring your heart and soul into it. It does remind me of that old parent adage, which is catch your kids doing something right. Because we're always very good at catching them doing something wrong. And it's like, so for editors, a mantra should be, catch your author writing something well and pointing that out in a different color, maybe. To
every editor I've worked with has done that with me. The best editors do that. They will point out the good stuff and tell you what made them laugh, what made them cry, that sort of thing. It's great.
And now talking about boosting people's confidence, we've got some brilliant wins this week, haven't we, Mark?
Yeah, it's been really, really good stuff over on the Academy, for example. So we've got Kerry Oman, let's start small and work up, shall we? Let's start small and work up. So Kerry Oman on the Academy today is the third day in a row that I've banked words. I'm officially calling it a streak, and my next goal is to hit double digits. I know that's a really small start, but it can only get bigger. Yes,
absolutely. That is, and people always talk about these things being small wins, but if just writing 3 days in a row, for many people, I know it did with me when I was starting out, it was hard to even get 3 days in a row. And that's why we set up the 200-word challenge. So congratulations, Kerry. And it's absolutely a streak. The beauty of that is you've done 3. She's now going for double digits, right? So it's all about just, looking at that, getting to that, milestone and then looking at what you can achieve next. And before you know it, you'll be at 20 days, 30 days, 50 days. And in some cases, we've seen people go into, someone's coming up to their first 1,000-day streak. It's coming in the next year, possibly. We'll update you on that if it happens. But that's great. So congratulations, Kerry.
Yes. Let's go to the other end of the scale. So we've got Sadie Paez on the Academy. She's typed the end. She said, my goal was 110,000 words. I came in just under 105,000 words 1 day after my target date. Champagne this weekend. So big congrats to you, Sadie. And this is it. This is the joy of the Academy, is seeing people hit those targets and do so incredibly well. And it's just an absolute joy. So yeah, big congrats to you, Sadie.
Yeah, brilliant stuff, Sadie. And she's worked so hard to get to that point as well. And, part of the benefit of being part of this kind of writing group is you get to celebrate it. So many people out there who finish their first draft and it's like, right, okay, what next? And it's just, you have to stop and you have to have a group of people to celebrate and cheer you on to the next stage. Otherwise, you don't recognize the value of that moment, of just how important and how much work and effort, blood, sweat and tears you put into that. So thank you so much for reporting that, Sadie, and congratulations. Can't wait to read the second draft.
Over on the BXP team on Facebook, this is heartbreaking. This is heartbreaking. Andrew Chapman, he says, I woke up this morning with a sense of dread in my heart. I realized, and it was my first waking thought, that I hadn't written yesterday. My writing streak is dead. And this is the heartbreaking bit. 222 days of writing. That's his streak. He'd written 98,059 words. So he's just shy of 100,000 words. But, you know, it's not always about the streak, Andrew. You know, you can have a day off. Have a day off, mate. So,
I think 222 could be his magic number. There's something interesting about that number. But also, here's the thing. Okay, Andy, you're back to zero, but never miss 2 days running. That's the thing. If you will, before you know it, get past that 222 and you'll smash it, and you'll have all those extra words. And the irony is you'll only have missed one day. Yeah. But 222 is phenomenal. I mean, let's just celebrate that. I mean, I know it's heartbreaking to miss 222 in my wildest dreams. So congratulations. Let's celebrate what you've achieved, Andy, and all those wonderful words that haven't disappeared, even though the streak has ended. Those words are there. You get to bank those. So brilliant.
Absolutely.
Well done.
Absolutely. Kimberly B on the Academy says she's discovered the magic of the bullet journal. This is totally a little mini win, she says, but posting it anyway, because it's what has gotten my writing life back on track after over a month-long lull. She said, I tried Mark D's suggestion in the last coaching session to use a bullet journal to shape life habits and find writing time. My life has been maddeningly busy since July, so I knew I desperately needed something to change, but was skeptical anything would work. But after quietly testing it out for a couple of weeks, it's worked wonders for me. Just last week, I wrote 5,000 words, up from 0 in previous weeks. Yes, it does admittedly require me to get up at the absolute crack of dawn, but it's helped me discover my creativity is at its best first thing in the morning. Mine too, Kimberly. And also has helped me achieve other life goals, even beyond writing, so it's here to stay. Thanks to Mark Devoe for that insight. Who knew it would be so impactful for me? Cheers to finding what works for you.
Wow.
How about that?
Absolutely love that. I love it. Absolutely love it. It's amazing, isn't it? Something so simple, but there is a technique and a way to use a bullet journal well. And online, you'll find a ton of stuff about people using bullet journals just to organize their life. But what I'm focusing on in the Academy is how you use a bullet journal as a writer, which isn't out there much. So, it warms my heart, Kimberly. Thank you so much for reporting that back. And that's what it's all about, life-changing moments. And that's sometimes, so many people are struggling with their writing and they think of it as this just mammoth challenge that they've got ahead of them of trying to work out how they write. Let me tell everyone right now, it's never a mammoth challenge. It's a small, tiny tweak that you start one day and you manage to carry it on the next day and the next day. And that's how your writing career starts. You look back and you think, it was all because of those little tweaks I made. So brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I'm really, really pleased to hear that.
Got more as well. Got Heather Goldsmith, who on the Academy said, I spent 2 whole hours editing my novel, Living Large, today. The win was that I went into the zone and was shocked to see that 2 hours had gone by. I didn't realize that could happen in editing. I've been spending time imagining myself enjoying editing, as in the way Mark D encouraged us to. I imagine feeling excited about it as I was struggling to like it at all. Today was very rewarding and helped me see there is value in the imagining game he has been encouraged us to indulge in. What's this imagining game, Mr. D? Tell us. Is this one of your secret sources?
I coach on this in the Academy. We do a lot of work around this to try and help people break through the challenges that they've got, and a lot of people have a real challenge with editing. They see it as a real nemesis. And I've come up with some techniques as to how people can literally flip it over to the point where, as you've just seen from that response, which is brilliant to hear, that Heather could almost get to a point where she actually starts to enjoy editing, having had it been such a big thing in her life to have to kind of it's the editing stage. What if, because I said to her, what if you could potentially, even down the line, see you actually start to enjoy it? And so it's about shifting our perceptions on what the stories we tell ourselves about writing, the stories we tell ourselves about editing. where there's always a way to love something, and the more that we love it, the better writers we can ultimately be. So yeah, lots more of that in the academy, but too much to go into detail here.
Wonderful. And I love Heather sing about the zone. I know that zone. It's like traveling.
It's a special place, isn't it?
Like
it's a special place.
Over on Twitter, we got a lovely note from Andrea J. Skinner, who is at Andrea J. Skinner, who is a regular 200 words a day contributor. So look for the hashtag 200 words a day. Andrea said, my Thursday, I did 3 loads of laundry before work, had a workout, a 10-minute writing exercise, a full day at the day job, and wrote 992 words on my commute. Can I get a gold star? Yes, Andrea, you can. You can have the biggest gold star there is.
I think massive gold star, and possibly even a gold pencil, which one of the academates said they once got from one of their teachers in kindergarten, which started them on their writing journey. So that is phenomenal. Wow.
And we've got a last of all, but by no means least, and we're coming up to 5 years of the podcast soon, and this is from at Sci-Fi Mike Morris, which is the alter ego of our friend Mike Shackle, who's a brilliant fantasy author published by Gollancz. And Mike says, I've just been reading old blog posts from back when I listened to an episode of the bestseller experiment that literally changed my life. What an amazing and crazy 5 years it's been. And do you know what episode that was? Can you recall that?
Was it Joe Abercrombie?
It was Joe Abercrombie.
Oh, look at that. Love it.
So yeah, he listened to you. I think Mike was on the verge. We've had Mike on Deep Dive, so I'll find it and put a link in the show notes. And he said he was on the verge of packing it in, and he heard Joe, and he's like, "No, I'm going to have another go at this." And 3 books with Gollancz and a fantastic career, and also as an indie author as well, as he writes as Mike Morris, science fiction stuff. Absolutely brilliant. So it's heartwarming to hear that kind of thing. Absolutely,
it's such a brilliant story, Mike, and thank you so much for sharing. And congratulations on all the amazing success that you've had, inspiring everyone out there. So absolutely fantastic, brilliant stuff,
folks. If you want to get in touch on social media, drop us a line. On Facebook, we are Bestseller Experiment. On Twitter and Instagram, we are at Bestseller XP. Please subscribe, rate, review, leave a star rating wherever you get your podcast from. These things always make a huge difference. Big thank you as always to our editors, Dave and JD. And let's go. Another writing week, Mr. D.
Absolutely. And folks, if you want to get writing, you've heard all the stories. We tell you this every week. It works. You've got to sign up to the 200 word challenge, 200wordchallenge.com, and join us to get writing. And if you would love to find out more about what's in the Academy, all this magical stuff that we do in there, pop over to academy.bestsellerexperiment.com. Applications are open now for October, but there's not many spaces because we are very, very full. So anyway, folks, have a great writing week, Mr. Stay, and I'll look forward to catching up with you and everyone out in Podland again this time next week. Take care, and it's goodbye from Mark 1.
And a goodbye from Mark 2. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Yeah.